It's like, how do they know that?
Right. Well, get ready to go down the rabbit hole because today we're diving deep, like deep into how Canadian political parties are using data.
And spoiler alert, it's way more complicated than just slapping your name on a flyer.
So much more. And we've got the research to prove it.
Oh yeah, we're going all in. Especially on those excerpts you shared from the influence industry, data analytics in Canadian elections.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're basically giving our listeners a backstage pass to the inner workings of a political strategist's, I don't know, like a war room or something.
Totally. But gotta remember, the Canadian political landscape is, well, it's uniquely Canadian. Even our electoral system makes this data stuff way more important than you might think.
Okay, so true. We're not talking two-party systems here, like our neighbors to the south.
Yeah.
First past the post in Canada.
All right, whoever gets the most votes in a riding wins, even if it's not by a majority.
Yep. Add to that our, let's be honest, low population density in a lot of places, and our tendency to end up with minority governments.
It's like a recipe for a full-on data arms race.
Seriously.
Parties are laser-focused on finding and motivating every single vote, especially in those ridings where it's neck and neck.
I imagine there's like zero room for error.
Zero.
It's like each vote is this tiny little puzzle piece.
Yes.
And they're frantically trying to put it all together before anyone else even knows what the picture's supposed to be.
100%. And here's the kicker. Unlike the U.S., where you can kind of bank on party loyalty, Canadian voters, we're wild cards.
We like to keep things interesting.
Exactly. We're way more likely to switch parties.
Yeah.
Less about blind allegiance and more about, well,
Who's going to make our lives better?
pretty much.
Which, thinking about it now, makes all this data stuff even more important.
Right.
If you can't rely on dear old grandpa's voting history to predict how someone's going to vote, what can you rely on?
The million-dollar question. And these days, data is becoming a pretty popular answer.
So we figured out Canadians, we're a pretty unpredictable bunch.
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
No offense to our amazing listeners, of course.
Of course, of course.
But seriously, how can you even begin to know how someone's going to vote
You're telling me it's like,
when they might not even know themselves?
right, well, that's where this whole micro-targeting thing comes in.
Micro-targeting.
Yeah, so picture this. You get this campaign message about, let's say, public transit, right? But it's not just because you're, like, in a certain age group or whatever.
Right.
It's because, and get this, the algorithm knows. It knows you take the bus.
Wow.
And it knows you've donated to, like, environmental causes before. That's micro-targeting.
Wow.
Using all that data to build these like super detailed profiles of voters.
Okay, I'm not going to lie. That feels a little intense.
It's powerful stuff.
Super effective, though.
Oh, for sure.
Which reminds me, I was reading about the Liberal Party. They have this whole liberalist system.
Oh, yeah. Liberalist. It's like their secret weapon, kind of.
It is. It's like their own personal crystal ball, you know?
Basically, it's a giant database, a campaign management system.
It's huge.
And it's a key part of how they use data.
And this is where my mind was blown, okay? Because I'm doing research for this, and I find out it's the same software Obama used in '08.
No way, really?
Yeah, the campaign that was like, hey, everyone, data is cool now.
Changed everything.
Changed the game.
That's right. Vote Builder by NGP Van. It's legendary in politics, that software.
Okay, so pretend for a second that I'm not a political data genius. Okay.
Okay.
How does it actually work? Break it down.
All right, so it takes info we all know, like the Elections Act list, you know, who's registered to vote, basic stuff, but then it layers on more and more.
Like what?
Think about those volunteers, right? Knocking on doors, chatting on the phone.
Yeah.
All that gets put into the system.
Wait, so it's not just my name and address anymore. It's like what I care about, what I even say to these volunteers.
Exactly.
Even if I'm like slamming the door in their face because it's dinner.
Especially then. They'll make a note of that. They're building up this whole picture of your political leanings. Are you left? Are you right? Are you going to vote? Who for?
Right. That's a lot.
It is.
And it gets even more interesting because there's this whole other layer of data they could use. I've read something about these commercially available data sources.
So these are interesting, right?
Yeah.
The liberals say they don't really use them, these external sources. But we know parties can get access. This is consumer data, demographics, like what companies use for targeted ads.
Hold on. Are you trying to tell me that my political opinions, that's like treated the same as my online shopping cart,
Kind of, yeah. It's a gray area, for sure. Some people say these commercial data sets, they're not that accurate for voting.
Okay.
But still, just the fact that it's possible,
So creepy.
it raises all these questions about, like, privacy. Are they being upfront about it?
And maybe this is just me, maybe I'm paranoid.
Go on.
But I feel like we hear all the time about what companies can't do with our data.
Totally.
But when it comes to political parties, it's like, yeah, go wild.
You've hit a nerve there. Canada, we don't have the same rules for political data as other places. Businesses have more regulations.
Really, that's wild.
It's a big gap because this isn't just, oh, that ad was for the right kind of shoes.
Right.
This is about potentially changing someone's vote, using info that's like super personal, maybe even biased.
It's giving me Cambridge Analytica vibes.
Oh, yeah.
Whole scandal. We saw what happens when you use data as a weapon.
It's scary.
And look, I like to think that Canada's above that, you know?
Sure, sure.
We're nice up here.
We are nice, but we're not immune. The same tactics, they're being used here, too.
So we're just as vulnerable.
Essentially, yeah. And without someone keeping an eye on things, making sure it's fair,
Right.
there's a real chance our elections could be influenced in ways we don't even realize.
Okay, so big question time.
Yippee!
What can we actually do about this? As voters, are we just supposed to accept that our information is being used like this? And maybe even manipulated?
Absolutely not. First step, awareness. Pay attention to those messages you're getting from parties. Are they, like, eerily specific to you? That's data at work. And don't be afraid to ask questions. How'd they get my info? What are they doing with it?
Right.
Demand some transparency.
And you know what? Maybe just knowing all this stuff,
Yeah.
it'll make us better voters anyway.
Right. You get a super targeted ad, you're like, hold on, let me look into this myself.
Exactly.
Don't just believe everything you see.
Critical thinking. It's important, people.
It's crucial. Do your own research, question everything, demand answers from politicians.
At the end of the day, this isn't about, like, targeted ads for shoes or whatever.
Exactly.
This is about democracy, right? Yeah. That every vote matters. That citizens are informed.
Not manipulated.
Not tricked by some algorithm.
It's a lot to unpack, that's for sure.
It really is. But an important conversation to have. So next time you're checking your mailbox, scrolling through your phone, even chatting with someone at your door,
be aware.
Data's there, lurking. We got to make sure it's being used for good.
Responsibly, ethically.
For a better Canada.
Hear, hear.
Data brokers in Canadian elections. Sounds like we're writing a spy novel or something.
Right. Secret meetings, files on everyone.
Exactly. But seriously, what's the deal with these companies?
They're like information dealers. They've got the goods, you know?
So instead of mortgages and air miles, they're selling info about us to political parties.
Pretty much. You mentioned Info Canada and Environics.
Big players.
Big players. And there are others. They're the ones making these deals happen.
Okay, but what kind of info are we even talking about here?
It runs the gamut. Public stuff, voter lists, demographics, that's the basic.
Right.
Then you get into, like, consumer preferences, what you do online, even, like, what magazines you subscribe to.
Okay, see, that's where I get a little, I don't know.
Yeah, it gets a little
uncomfortable. We've been talking about data privacy.
Right, and it's different when it's, like, your vote.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Versus my taste in, like, gardening magazines or whatever.
And that's the thing about Canada. The rules around this stuff, for political parties, way more relaxed than for businesses. Companies, they've got strict privacy laws, what they can collect, how they use it.
Right, which we've talked about before.
But those rules don't always apply to the parties themselves.
Are you serious? So they can just use our data in ways that a company would get in huge trouble for?
It's a gap, for sure. A gap in our regulations. And it needs a closer look because...
So it's a big deal.
It's not just about, oh, this ad is very specific to me.
Right.
This is about potentially swaying an election based on info that's, I don't know, maybe not even fair to use.
It's giving me, like, Cambridge Analytica flashbacks.
The whole thing.
That was wild. And we saw how badly it can go wrong, using data as a weapon.
It's a slippery slope, for sure.
And I know we like to think Canada's above that.
We're too nice.
Right.
Exactly. But we're not immune. These tactics, they're global. And without proper rules, oversight.
It could happen here.
It could. And we might not even know what's happening until it's too late.
So the big question, what can we even do about this? Should we just accept it?
Absolutely not. First things first, pay attention to how parties are talking to you. Getting messages that feel super personalized, that's data.
Okay, then what?
Ask questions. Don't be afraid to be like, hey, how'd you get my info? What are you doing with it?
Demand some transparency. I like it.
We need more of that.
Maybe just knowing all this, that's a good first step for voters.
Totally. Be more aware. See a targeted ad. Don't just take it at face value.
Right. Do your own research.
Exactly. Don't let yourself be manipulated. And hey, let's push for better rules around this stuff, stronger privacy laws.
Because at the end of the day, this isn't about some algorithm deciding things.
It's about our democracy.
Exactly. Every vote should count the same. And we should be informed, not like tricked by data.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, there you have it. Next time you're checking your mailbox, scrolling online, even just chatting with someone at your door, remember, data's there. It's up to all of us to make sure it's being used for good. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Until next time, stay curious out there.